There's baseline nutrients that you'll always need, but something we see a lot is, people are ultra high in calcium and they're taking, not only are they maybe taking calcium, but they're often taking vitamin D, which if they have a magnesium deficiency could actually hinder.
Barton, tell us about this research from upgraded formulas, and let's go a little bit deeper into some of these.
Sure, I'd love to. One of the things you're talking about there, moodiness, which is exactly what Shawn was touching on with SSRIs as well, and serotonin, like you were talking about earlier, is lithium. And there was an amazing study that's so interesting. It was a groundwater study, and they found that in the US, and this is true for any country, that the areas that had the lowest levels of lithium in the groundwater had the highest rates of both depression and unfortunately suicide as well.
Wow.
One of the products that I put out, an early batch, to tell a brief story, was from an ex-girlfriend who was taking it. And I didn't know this at the time, but she was taking an SSRI and she actually stopped taking it without telling me she was on it, without anything, but she found that she didn't really need it, so she'd stop. That was her choice. This is not advice. And what happened was that she did feel a lot better. Her personal story, this had lithium in it. It was an early batch, though. It was a pilot batch, so we ran out. It had lithium, it had some of our magnesium, it had some blood sugar balancing things like chromium and fulvic acid and trace minerals. And she didn't need it, and she felt brighter. She felt like herself again, which was amazing. And she actually absorbed it because of our process.
That's really interesting. So this groundwater study on lithium. So how do you get lithium in your body? And is lithium one of the primary supplements that we should be looking at?
It's certainly a very important one. Now, people, it's a trace element, but trace doesn't mean you don't need any of it. Trace just means you need a smaller amount of it. It's not a macro thing. Like, you need a lot of magnesium every day to be fully energized, because there's explosions as we're talking, sitting here. There are just trillions of explosions happening in all of our mitochondria, like you're talking about. So, to make energy, you have to have magnesium, you have to have oxygen, you actually have to have copper too, which a lot of people don't know about. Yeah, so it's essential. It's one of the things we look at in hair as well.
Wow, so you're saying magnesium is important, lithium is important, and lithium, how do you get that?
Lithium, you can find it, in your water supply. You can find it in certain foods, like certain nuts will have lithium. But really, I think we come back to a phrase that we trademarked, which is test, don't guess. And test, because of bio-individuality being a thing, and also not only are you individual and we all have different levels here, but also you right now versus you when you have even more energy than you start some other venture, or you start training for a marathon. Your needs change, whether you have high energy, low energy, you start to feel better, you take on more, so we look at testing quarterly for that reason, because the example I always give is it's a lot like us going on a road trip together. How many times do we look at navigation to get to our destination? Once? Many times?
I like that analogy. Yeah. So what you're saying is that what supplements we need is something that we probably want to test ourselves like every 3 months or so and modify our supplement stack.
Yeah.
Certain points in our life we may be low on testosterone, and you may take supplements like ashwagandha and pine pollen that increase testosterone.
Yeah.
Certain points in our life we may be higher than normal on testosterone, and so your supplement stack changes. You're not taking the same thing for the rest of your life.
Right, and there's baseline nutrients that you'll always need, but something we see a lot is, people are ultra high in calcium, and they're taking, not only are they maybe taking calcium, but they're often taking vitamin D, which if they have a magnesium deficiency could actually hinder. Depending, again, we want to look at everything all together, but if your calcium is so high that it's actually at a cellular level impeding your ability to absorb other nutrients into the cell, it's a bad idea. So you should go and get sun, and you should take magnesium, you should take cofactors like B6 to get it in, boron as well to drive it in.
So speaking of moodiness, I know you have a formulated stack that you sell for moods. Tell us about that.
Yeah, called it upgraded mood because it really is profound. A lot of people talk about feeling their anxiety calm. You know, it just gives them more emotional bandwidth, essentially, is the felt sensation of what's happening.
And what's an upgraded mood?
Upgraded mood has lithium, which is actually an element. You know, people think of it as something besides that, but it's an element. Now, sometimes it's prescribed in higher doses, but you know, lithium's in there, chromium's in there. Chromium's great for balancing blood sugar. It's really, truly essential. Like, I mean, and we absorb such little chromium, and anytime we eat something sweet, chromium goes out in our urine. So there's some magnesium in there to, again, calm. Not as much as in something like upgraded magnesium that you're taking, but you know, there's and then there's trace minerals. And
so it's a complete mood stack that actually alters your mood. I love that.
Yeah.
Now, Shawn, you and I are developing a supplement for moods as well. But what would be going inside this supplement?
So for mood, it just depends. But in the case of some of the things we're looking at, we can look at adaptogens. And this, to me, is core. Because yes, we can take things that can push the limits for a short period of time. Think of like how most pharmaceuticals work. They inhibit an enzyme, they block a receptor, and this works for a short period of time, but it doesn't work long term because the body loves homeostasis. It loves to find a way over, around, and through. But these things that make you more centered, more resilient, instead of like these come at a cost ingredients like a caffeine, are the most legendary in all the cultures. So ashwagandha in India, rhodiola in Russia, ginseng in Asia, maca in South America. These are the most storied herbs because they center you and make you more resilient. It actually increases something called your allostatic capacity, your capacity for stress. So this is why they can, this is called bimodal, when it improves your sleep and your energy and concentration. It gives you both. And so that's what's so potent about adaptogens and what I love about them. Also, I think critical to mood, and most of us deal with, is varying levels of anxiety. You know, in as entrepreneurs, imposter syndrome, right? Or when we get on stage, I don't know if you feel it anymore, but I do, is, you know, anxiety, right?
Anxiety,
or what
so
about
common.
with sex? Right. You know, like all these kinds of things, like that are so deeply personal, all of our traumas, like anxiety does play out and is draining. So things like hanakiol from magnolia bark is incredible. Theanine is another herb that's really amazing from green tea. Again, magnesium. Right. You know, some of these things are really potent, but hanakiol, I would encourage people to explore with that magnolia bark. And there's even a metabolite called dihydrohanakiol beta. And this is so potent, literally making you just feel so zen and relaxed. And that can, in that, you can get to bliss. You can get to euphoria. You can get to better sleep.
I like what you said, bimodal. They help you sleep better, but they also give you more energy.
Yes.
Is magnesium one of those things that's bimodal?
Absolutely.
Right. So that's incredible, right? So again, with magnesium, I personally use upgraded formulas magnesium.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you guys sell a all-in-one mood supplement called Upgraded Moods. I admit I haven't tried Upgraded Moods yet, but I do use upgraded magnesium, and I use upgraded tea, which is an energy supplement. We'll talk about that later. Now, what Shawn mentioned is adaptogenic mushrooms and herbs. Shawn, you gave us a long list, and I think that's beautiful. But if you had to recommend the top 3 for someone to experiment with in terms of helping sleep and helping moods, what would be your top 3?
Ashwagandha, rhodiola, and this magnolia bark.
Ashwagandha, rhodiola, and magnolia bark. And we can get this as individual supplements?
Yes. And of course, we talked about magnesium, but that's in other stacks that we already touched on.
Right.
Yeah.
What brands would you recommend for these supplements?
I mean, across the board, like I love Designs for Health, Thorne, Zymogen. Those are like very high end. But on a kind of more modest level of cost, but great quality control, would be brands like Now, Jarrow. Those are very solid. Solgar. Those are great brands.
Now, let's talk about ashwagandha and rhodiola. So I'm an investor in Shroomwell, And Shroomwell is an Estonian company that does adaptogenic mushrooms. So obviously I'm going to recommend Shroomwell because I've been taking their products.
Sure.
You can find them at SHROOMWELL. Are there any brands you recommend for radiola and ashwagandha?
Again, I would use Thorn, Now. Those are probably two of my favorites, yeah.